Welcome to the Lance Wallnau Show. Today's scintillating episode, a celebration of the power of intentionality. This key is going to help you break through every barrier in your life. The first barrier is you have to like and subscribe to this show. Now, if we're not on YouTube anymore, we don't want to hit the bell to be alerted. There's no bell to hit.
I was thinking we should launch a level 10 YouTube channel, though. What if we just did a level 10 YouTube channel?
Let's do this.
Okay. Carl, make it happen.
I thought we had one.
No, we don't. Not yet. We can make one, though.
Well, we need one now.
We have one. It's just we don't utilize it.
Well, we will now.
But we will.
Well, I don't know if the Lance Wallnau Show can be mentioned on the Level 10 Living.
It cannot.
Yeah. You're a band, not the show.
Well, all right. Level 10 Living with Lance Wallnau coming to YouTube.
Yeah,
soon.
Like and subscribe. Hit that bell.
Like and subscribe, and when it shows up, hit the bell. Mm-hmm. I want to go into this right now, but before we do, I'm wearing my birthday shirt. Woo! Because this is my happy birthday me. All week, we celebrate the birthday because people missed it over Labor Day weekend, so I want to make sure they can catch up and celebrate.
You were born over Labor Day weekend, or does it just sync up like that?
Can you believe it? My mother went into labor on Labor Day. That's something that just occurred to me now.
Well, something that's occurred to me is just to thank you for wearing your birthday shirt and not your birthday suit to the shoot. So thank you for that.
Well,
I appreciate it.
I was born in a birthday suit, but the shirt came later. We're going to talk about the power of intentionality now. Don't miss this point, because this is going to come from our seminal research on, look up the word seminal. I don't even know what it means, but it's a great word. The ultimate life strategy, your ultimate life strategy. What?
No, I was just thinking, well, I'm from Tallahassee, Florida. So when you say Seminole, but it sounds like Seminole, which is like, if you're from FSU, it's like, oh, but I don't know.
Nobody knows what you're talking about.
Lots of
FSU
people
knows
know
what she's talking about.
what I'm talking about.
And seminal means, not the second definition, of a work, event, moment, or figure strongly influencing later developments.
A work, event, moment, or figure.
Of a work.
Of a work.
Strongly influencing later
This is
development.
going to strongly influence your destiny.
There you go.
All right? The power of intentionality, page 13 on your ultimate life strategy, which, by the way, you can get. If you don't have it yet, you can go to what? Level 10?
Level10living.com.
Level10living.com. You don't want to miss this. You use the promotion code podcast and you get a significant discount, like 20%.
20%.
It's too much.
Off of it. Yeah, it's a lot.
Too much.
I want to talk about this. Keep your eye on the prize, not on the process. This is big for people because there's plenty of challenges coming. But you know what? Challenges don't alter your destiny. That's why even being prophetic now is more important than ever before, because God factored in your time in history into your prophecy. Everything God ever told you, everything that's actually been prophesied to you, over you, or if you have never had a prophecy, you're a walking prophetic, magnet right now, because God has something to tell you about your future. And he calculated every adversity into the blueprint, which is why this is so important today, how to manifest what God called you. And it doesn't change because of what's going on with an economy, what's going on with politics, what's going on with wars and rumors of wars. Your destiny, if anything, is fulfilled when you start to work how to manifest the assignment God gave you. And that's why today, the power of intentionality is our focus. So what is intentionality? I remember it was a friend of mine, Brian Clemmer, who was a great developer. Carl actually went to some Clemmer programs. And some of you that are watching may have even heard of him. He had a thing called Heart of the Samurai, which was training. This is a guy who was a believer. He was a West Point graduate. And Brian was short in stature, but he played football and did military stuff with twice the energy and zeal, kind of like a Rocky Marciano, who nobody thought could ever be a boxer because he was too small. The Rocky Marciano had a history of like 40 wins and no losses because he used his smallness as a advantage, so he could get up close and deliver these knockout punches so well. So the idea of intentionality came to me from Brian Clemmer. And Carl, give us an assessment of why we put this in here as being such a key to manifesting destiny.
One of the ideas is that the idea of focusing on the future that you want to see and that you want to have as a reality will actually help sustain you through the process. So it's What is the Bible verse? You would know it better than I as far as the terminology, but for the gift set before him
for the hope.
For the hope.
Yeah, it says it's in Hebrews. For the hope that was set before him, Jesus endured the contradiction of sinners against himself. He endured the process of rejection, a rigged trial, and an unjust execution.
Yep.
Because the outcome he saw on the other side was worth the ordeal.
And it was clear. He had a very clear vision of what that future was going to be.
Had an absolutely clear vision. And it's interesting when we talk about prophecy in relation to destiny, that clarification for him came on the Mount of Transfiguration. And a lot of people miss this. On the Mount of Transfiguration, you remember John and James and Peter go up into this mountain. And while they're like, groggy or something or sleeping, suddenly Jesus is having an interview with Moses and Elijah. And Moses and Elijah, which symbolize the Old Testament law and the prophets, are, it says in Luke, discussing with him his decease, his death, and what he's about to accomplish in Jerusalem. He had a prophetic presbytery of the highest order. There was no human being that could do it. So the Father sent Moses and Elijah to confirm with Jesus what's going to happen and how it's going to end up victorious. So he comes down from that mountain knowing clearly what's going to take place and resolved to endure the contradiction. It's a very, very powerful verse. So what I want to do now is focus on the power of intentionality. Means that you are focused on the manifestation of a certain outcome. You have to be very clear about what the outcome is to endure the contradiction. Because if you don't have a clear picture of what it looks like, you'll waver on it. More importantly, if you don't know that God called you to do it, then you'll start to interpret all the opposition you run into as a sign that maybe God doesn't want you to do it. That's why being clear on the calling is so important. So one of the keys to enduring the contradiction is this idea in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 36. We're going to go to a Bible verse. Hebrews 10, 36 says something. No matter what God calls you to do, the path, the destiny, the work will always be unique. There will be nobody that will do exactly what you do. But yet these principles are going to constantly apply. Verse 36 says, 35 says, do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward. Don't throw away, don't lose your confidence, for you have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what was promised. So here you see something, that a promise is something that requires an endurance to obtain. The bigger the promise, the greater the contradiction. And so since this is a biblical principle, you can guarantee that no matter what unique call you've got, these elements will be involved. Faith and endurance are going to, there's another verse that says, through faith, we inherit the promises. Where's that verse? Chelsea, look that up, will you? There's a verse called inherit the promises. We're going to look that up.
Hebrews 6:12.
Oh, thank you, Carl. You saved Chelsea from having to look it up. All right, Hebrews 6:12.
Maybe not.
Yeah, no, that's the perfect verse.
Hey.
And we desire that each of you should show the same diligence to realize the full assurance of hope until the end, so that you will not be sluggish or lazy, but imitators of those who through faith and patience inherit the promises. So notice the two things that are indispensable for all destiny. You have to have faith, which means you see the invisible. You see God and you see his word, even though it's not tangible, yet it's working out in your circumstance. And through faith and patience, or perseverance, or endurance, all three words are fed off of that word, patience. Mm-hmm. It has to do with endurance. And notice that do not be sluggish. So why would sluggishness be a warning for people, Mercedes?
I don't know. I think when it comes to this idea of enduring the contradiction, it's almost like we feel like it should just be there, right? But you think of all these great Bible stories. I mean, even David when David's anointed, like he's the least of the brothers, And so you've got a contradiction there, and time again, Joseph, you see these contradictions. And so you almost feel like, well, why haven't I obtained the thing yet? Why is it not, I have the vision, why is it not my hand? So I would almost think maybe the sluggishness comes from going through that contradiction of like, well, do I even try to advance? Is this just my lot in life? That's what I would think. But maybe you've got a different answer.
Well, no. I think what can happen is, I think particularly Christians can get lazy, so that if God said it, it's going to happen. And that's not true. If God said it, you can guarantee there'll be opposition to keeping it from manifesting. Because if it's that important that God himself wants it manifest, the devil will make it his personal mission to keep it from being manifest.
Well, if I could just interject here, also in James 2:26, for just as the body without spirit, breath, is dead, so also faith without works is dead. So it's not enough to just have this vision before you, to have a vision board. You have to act in alignment with making that thing a reality.
Wow, that's powerful. Well, we got 57 seconds in this segment. Carl, what I'd like to do is have you go to the flip chart and show us in the next segment what the phases are that people go through. 4 phases to manifesting what God called you to do. And we'll look at, and there's 2 aspects I want you to see. One is the heart journey. The heart journey is the motivational journey. That's where the battle is. People quit because of the price. They don't quit because of the ability they've got. They quit because of the opposition. But I want to look at the motivational journey and then look at the 4 phases of mastery, which is skill is growing through the contradiction. People miss it. But as you're meeting the resistance, you're building a muscle. As you're pushing back, you're developing character. So we're going to look at how these 4 phases work in the next segment. This is a special birthday push I'm doing right now. I want all of you on the same page, because for you that are in Florida and our new affiliates and shows that we're doing, you want to get a hold of the Ultimate Life Strategy. This is where it's the best coaching I could ever give. I used to do this one-on-one, then I did it one on 20 and 30. Then we ended up with thousands of people. And I said, let me put it into a concise format where I could reach every one of you with level10.com. That's the material. That's the site you go to. You get 4 different modules that talk about the phases and stages of fulfilling destiny. And I literally walk you through how to get clear on who you are, get clear on what you're called to do, get clear in the process, get clear on hearing God and working through the clutter of the competition in your life. You want to use the special podcast code podcast, and it gets you 20% off. Level10living.com, code podcast. Years ago, an award-winning researcher discovered 4 phases in group formations. This is how groups actually work. And then a friend of mine, Ken Blanchard, who wrote The 1 Minute Manager and Situational Leadership, brilliant guy, is like a best-selling author on management theory. We discussed how those 4 phases with groups actually work for individual destinies. And so we took that group model and broke it down into personal prophetic process. And I want to show you those 4 phases, and I want you to think about, where are you right now personally in the journey of manifesting God's work for your life? Carl, help them out.
Happily. So here we're going to talk about Marvel, phase 4. No, I'm just kidding. These are the 4 phases that we're talking about. It starts with a dream. With this dream, we get very excited, we get very eager, we get empowered, we get motivated, we get inspired. We have this amazing dream of what life could be. And then when we actually start pushing ourselves to make that dream a reality, we tend to fall all the way down to distress, because we realize that we are unconscious incompetence, and we are developing our competence. So we are now a conscious incompetent, is one way to look at this. So we're going to be sad face. No, he's distressed. So after we've become distressed, we realize where we need to improve. We realize the area of expertise that we don't have. We begin to develop those skill sets. And that will bring us a little bit further up the mountain. Not all the way there, of course, but we're going to do a little, yeah, this unibrow dude is ready. He's in it. He's ready to rock. And then after we've developed ourselves for days, weeks, months, sometimes years, maybe even decades developing our skill set. Only after we've accomplished that level of conscious competence can we actually move into the realm of unconscious competence, where we're back at the level where our dream stage was, and we are super stoked. Look at that guy. He's so happy. Oh man, he's just happiest as a clam. That dude is stoked. Now, what this looks like emotionally is very similar to this dotted line that you see here. We start out incredibly happy, eager, motivated, we're ready for that challenge, and then boom, we hit a challenge that we're not ready for. Or we think we're ready for it and we're not. So after we've had that bit of distress, the heart sinks. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, and it feels like hope deferred because we had this dream and it's not realized yet. So what do we have to do? We have to develop ourselves. We have to develop our skill set. We have to work on our talents, our abilities, God-given or not. It's on you to actually get better. Faith without works is dead, we mentioned in the previous segment, and it's very true. It's not enough to just have a vision of what we want. It's not enough to just have a dream. You gotta work on it, man. You gotta put the time in. And that's what these 4 stages are. That's what these 4 phases are. Dream, distress, development, and then demonstration. Now, one thing that I also wanna add in, if I may, is this idea of the plateau. Now, in life, we're going to hit plateaus. There's going to be times where we don't feel like we're improving. We don't feel like we're growing. We don't necessarily feel like we are developing adequately. These times are often plateau experiences, and we have to sustain ourselves through those plateau experiences in order to get to these spots right here where we actually start getting those growth moments, those options for improvement. So that's the quick 5-minute rundown on the 4 phases.
No, I love that. And so what that shows you is that the journey of destiny is twofold. It's the emotional roller coaster that you have. I should probably do it the other way. The screen goes that way. So your emotional roller coaster is taking you up to fulfillment, but it doesn't go like, wow, the whole way. What is going gradually and progressively in the right direction, which would be my hand going this way, is the, no, it's actually my hand.
There you go, yeah. Nope, the
you
other
got to
way.
do everything opposite with a television. What's happening
It's
is
downhill for you, Dad.
Yeah, the plateaus are like this as you're moving up. And what I want to focus on is that when you were, and it could be confusing because you were throwing in language which might be a little advanced, which is conscious incompetence, unconscious competence, because that's the skill journey. And the skill journey means that when you're getting on a bicycle the first time you're riding it, you see all the other kids on a bicycle and you get on. And how many of you remember your first experience on a bicycle was falling off the bicycle? And then you have to give yourself the courage to get back up, because the coordination of your legs and balance, and you can't do it, you can't stand still because you'll tip over. You have to actually have momentum in order to be able to balance. So it's a perfect metaphor for you can't learn how to ride a bicycle by reading a book. You can't learn how to ride a bicycle by having a coach. But the coach can at least show you the phases and stages and fundamental skills you need to be able to go. And then what's the first thing you discover? Moving is one thing, stopping is the other skill. And when you want to stop, that's frequently where people jam on the brakes and they go flying around. So in your life, I want you to think about something you've learned how to do really well, cooking. Now, Mercedes, you cook. And have you ever had any flops in the kitchen?
Not really.
You're like Donald Trump when they ask him in Iowa, have you ever had a sin? And he goes, none that I can think of. All right, but if you didn't have a mistake in the cooking.
Well, there's just things you're more naturally gifted at. You know what I mean? But like if there's a learned skill.
But do you have menus you work with? Do you have information you're working with?
Well, yeah. I mean, you start off with recipes. Sure. You start with a recipe and then you end up thinking like, at this point, I just kind of know how much of each spice to put in there. I do by taste, right? So you get all the way to that demonstration phase and you're like, yeah, I think this will work together.
Yeah,
but sure.
It's very similar to riding a bike, right? Once you have that full body immersion in the experience, such as cooking, once you taste the food that you've made, you know what balances well. Then because you've had that full body immersion in the experience, it's more likely that you can demonstrate.
Fish, I've messed up. I had to think about it for a second because you can overcook fish really easy.
Fish
It
don't fry in the
burns really easy. It's one of the harder things to cook I mean, it's easy now, but like when you're first starting out with it, you don't really realize it cooks a lot faster than everything else.
All right, so I'm going to make sure that I find the right illustration to call on in the future.
You know, but I do think we need to talk about even the idea of what's the dream, because this is going out on our podcast. You said earlier that, hey, we have these new Florida stations. So everybody's listening on the podcast should know, hey, you could watch us now in the Tampa, Naples area. We're down there on CTN. But for those who are new to this material, when you're talking about the dream, I mean, what is that? What is that? Are we talking Tony Robbins' dream? What are we talking? You know, like your best life now? What is that?
Well, that's a good question. So
That's a great question.
the beauty of the committed Christian life is your dreams change as you follow Jesus. All right, let's talk about dreams, God-given dreams, because we're confusing a couple of analogies here. I'm talking about a prophetic destiny, but let's start with something really kind of basic. When you come into the world, you have certain desires and you're wired for certain things. And those passions and desires and interests and proclivities are an indication of what your gifting is, what your calling is. When the disciples started with Jesus, they thought they were on the fast track to ruling with the Messiah. As they began to realize that he is the Messiah, remember James and John, their mother, comes to Jesus and says, I want you to do me a favor. And Jesus says, what would you like? You can have anything you want. She says, I want my boys to be at your left hand and at your right hand in your kingdom, which tells you the families and the disciples themselves all thought they were going to be ruling in the administration of Alexander the Great. They thought that they were going to have a messianic hero. They had not yet understood the cross. They had not understood the resurrection. They didn't know the plan. But Jesus, while he taught them, he did not go out of his way necessarily to prematurely have to mess up their understanding. He matured them into the role where they eventually would lay down their lives for the kingdom. They didn't start off there, they grew into it. And so what happens is, I'll give you an example, it's personal. When I began, I really had a desire to do what I'm doing now, which is communicate. I like sharing stuff. I liked entertaining, talking, and I had friends of mine who went on to do Saturday Night Live in New York. Another went to LA and works with Larry David and does Tom and Jerry voiceovers. And these were my best friends. And when I was in college, I was going to go into theater. But when I got saved and I got filled with the Spirit, I realized the desire to be able to express myself, communicate, and have an audience had to die, because it was really not a call for being in the entertainment field. It was a call to preach. So I let go of that dream, and God gave it back to me in the form of a calling to preach the gospel. And I arguably have perhaps thousands of people that I'm talking to now that is the result of a dream that I let go of so that God could give it back to me in its glorified form. Mm-hmm. So your talents, abilities, and dreams lead you towards your destiny, and then your encounter with Jesus sanctifies what you do with that dream. So you realize, so suppose you're called to make a lot of money, and you're building businesses. I can guarantee this applies to some people out there. At some point, God starts to say, and what is that money for, by the way? And you thought it was for another plane or another property, and you realize you're funding the kingdom of God. Now, suddenly, the end result, which was attaining wealth, has a greater purpose, which is using wealth to advance the kingdom. That means actually giving what you've got rather than accumulating more. Your talent didn't change. God sanctified the trajectory for what you do with it. And so the cross becomes, for the believer, the sanctifying crucible of what you do with the dream you have. And you'll find that the dream God gave you still is real. It has a higher manifestation than what you thought. The main thing that I want to get across that we did not talk about, and we'll have to do a second episode for this, is that, and this is a mysterious thing, you always get the outcome you intended, but it may not be the outcome you want. That's an important point. We didn't cover that at all here. I want to get into that in the next episode. What that means is, one of the mysteries I've found is that if we're not aware of what our own needs are, we can actually be trying to accomplish something and sabotaging it because of some area in our life that's competing with that manifestation. So, for instance, we talk about in the training here, where some people maybe want to have a rapport with somebody and connect with them. And you find that instead of, like my wife says, instead of it being a click, it's a cluck. Well, that's because you weren't actually meeting the other person where they're at. You were meeting them where you're at. So if you're dealing with an extrovert, you're going to have to be a little bit more extroverted. If you're dealing with an introvert, you might want to dial it down a little. I remember one time I went to a meeting and I was in a hugging phase, and I just was hugging everybody. I got off a plane, this is before 9/11, and I was hugging the people that came to pick me up to go to a conference. And I kept on hugging people that weren't with the group, and they were hugging me back. And someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Lance, they're not with us." And I realized, oh my gosh. But it's somehow my approach to them wasn't threatening, and they were reciprocating and hugging me back in an airport of all places. So getting the outcome you want is what I want to focus on in the next episode. But there's so many layers to this. We have 40 separate modules of insight that we coach people with in the level 10 curriculum. So I want you to get all 4 modules. And right now, like I said, we're in the ultimate life strategy version, but you go to level10living.com. And if you use the code word podcast, then you get 20% off. It's the smartest investment you'll ever make. It's literally what took 40 years of me working with secular and Christian leaders to decode and deconstruct. How do they actually end up doing what they do? And I broke it down to find the biblical principles. We're going to be back again with our next episode. You don't want to miss it. Get the book, get the manual, and you can start right on the same page as us. Thanks for joining us.
Lance Wallnau shares how understanding and releasing the power of your personal story can unleash your gifts and destiny. Learn more at level10living.com. And don't forget to use the code PODCAST.